Thank you, and good morning, colleagues. Good morning to the people of Guam. The Committee on Appropriation Housing will continue the discussion on Bill 282-35 LS. Joe, would you, my staff will conduct the roll call just so we know who's present and so the people of Guam will know who's participating. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Senator San Agustin.
Present.
Vice Chairman Senator Rigel. Vice Chair Senator Shelton.
Hafide, good morning.
Thank you. Member Speaker Tina Munya-Barnes.
Manana Situ Skagya.
Member Senator Regine Bisco-Lee.
Buenas, Skagya.
Member Senator Therese Terlahi.
How you do?
Member Senator Jose Pino Terlahi.
Yeah.
Member Senator Kelly Marsh Taitano.
Mr. Guitu.
Member Senator Will Castro. Member Senator James Moylan.
Here.
Member Senator Luis Munya.
How you do?
Thank you. And if I may go back, Senator Rigel, Vice Chair, just logged in, and if I could just get your present here, Senator Rigel, Vice Chair.
He's still connecting, so.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that he is present and that his system is now connecting. We also have online Mr. Chairman, other senators who have been via motion yesterday. Welcome to the meeting, Senator Telo Taitagui. We also have Senator Sabina Perez and Senator Mary Torres at this time.
Right, can you identify also the panel?
Yes, thank you.
The folks that were also invited?
Yes, thank you. From the Office of Finance and Budget, we have the Director, Mr. Steve Guerrero. From the Director of the Department of Revenue and Taxation, Mrs. Daphne Matsukit-Shimizu. We also have the Director of the Department of Administration, Mr. Edward Byrne, and the President of the Guam Economic Development Authority, Ms. Melanie Mendiola.
Joe, were we able to get
one
hold
more.
of Mr. Yeah.
One more. We have the Director, my apologies, of BBMR, Mr. Lester Carlson.
All right, thank you. Were we able to get hold of Mr. Gary Hiles?
We have been attempting. Likewise, we provided him with the information for the link, and to date, we have not been successful to get him on.
All right. Okay, so we have more than sufficient number for quorum. Thank you, colleagues, for joining. And we have also Senator Castro's here.
Correct.
You did recognize him?
My apologies.
Thank you. Not a problem. Thank you, Senator Castro, for joining. My colleagues, we were on page 7. Steve, can you, the last thing we were discussing on page 7, but I also want to start out with asking my colleagues that we're in discussion mode. Let's try to minimize the number of questions we ask at a time, and so we can allow everybody else to answer questions. And please understand that, okay, I see a message from Senator Kelly that Mr. House may be on medical leave. So we'll leave that alone for now. But I asked my colleagues, try to minimize your questions, even though I did start the rules with the 5 minutes, but we need to allow everybody a chance to talk. Okay, so just share the airwaves and we'll move along. We will begin first with Steve. I needed you to report back your discussion with DOE and with GVB on how they're to fund the increase and the anticipation. And when my colleagues, just to remind you, if you went through the budget bill, you'll find that the issue dealing with the verbiage for refinancing is on further down. So don't ask the question about the refinancing, because why? It's on chapter 14 and chapter 15. It's further down in the budget. And I know Ms. Mendiola will be ready to answer a question on that issue when we get to that chapter. All right, Steve, would you go ahead and start out with response to page 7, line 20 and line 26, the DOE and GVB.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, before we start, I was reviewing the session last night, and I apologize for the video on my part, seeming that I have this new laptop and the camera is on the bottom portion of the screen. So I noticed every time I'm reading off the paper, it was covering the entire screen and not realizing until last night I was watching the darn thing, and you can see my fingers all over the screen, and I apologize for that. So now I'm using a different laptop with the cameras on top, so it gives me a different, gives you all like you, the way I'm seeing you guys now. So I just wanted to let you know that my screening you out yesterday wasn't on purpose. Okay. Anyway, yes, I did talk to both Governor Gutierrez and Superintendent John Fernandez last night separately. First, I spoke to the governor and I explained to him what we were trying to do. And that was utilizing GVB's appropriation temporarily to pay off the difference in the hot bond for that's being funded out of the TAF. I also explained to him, because we are identifying GVB as a fund source, is because GVB currently right now has the bulk of the TAF. After explaining to him what we're doing, he agreed in principle that he had no problem doing that. He only asked for two things. One is that he's assured that whatever savings and the amount that we take out from GVB's appropriation, we return back to him when the refunding and refinancing is completed. I told him, I said, as far as I'm concerned, I've been assured that that's basically what is supposed to happen. But I told him I can't speak for the body itself, but I will do my best to make sure that that is the intent of his approval on this. The other thing he was asking for was that there's a provision in the budget right now regarding lobbyists. He was just asking whether or not that provision can stay there. I told him it's already inserted in the bill. As far as I'm concerned, that's all I can do at this point. And he said, fine, not a problem. So as far as Governor Gutierrez, he's on board utilizing GVB money to help pay off the debt owed for the hot bond, with the assumption that when the bond is completed in terms of refinancing, that all proceeds go back to GVB. I also spoke to okay.
Go to
I also
now.
spoke to John Fernandez, Superintendent of DOE. I explained to him also what we were trying to do, utilizing DOE funds temporarily to utilize to pay for the outstanding balance that we needed to pay on the debt service for JFK. He also is on board. He has no problem with that, but he also wants to note that any savings as a result of the refunding for the JFK bond goes back to GDOE. And that was his only concern. He's going to speak to the board today to advise them, to let them know what we're doing. But as far as he's concerned, he had no problem with it. So that, Mr. Chairman, is the report from both of them.
Okay, I would like to also, I received a text from my colleagues so that we all, I received a message from the governor this morning. Looking for it right now. The governor sent to me, Senator, please be reminded, and I extended to all of my colleagues. Please be reminded the discussion over coronavirus funds should stop as Legislature has no appropriation authority over these funds. I appreciate courtesy over this request. I can understand my colleagues where she's coming from. We're not looking, I know that none of us are looking at appropriating anything with the CARES because we know fact how that money came in. But our concern was never about appropriating, but just knowing where it's going. I think that is the message from all my colleagues that I got yesterday, and I've gotten for the past month. So with that, for the folks that are representing the governor, which is BBMR, Lester, and on all the folks from the administration, At no point, I don't believe any of my colleagues were actually wanted to appropriate anything with the CARES. We just wanted to know where it's going and how it's being used. And that was our main question. Where it's going and how it's being used. And we're just trying to make sure that there's, we want to be able to see the impact. All right, moving along. We're now going to go to page 8. I already advised OB, he's not going to read line per line. I think everyone here can read the line themselves. But is there any questions from page 8 that we're in discussion mode? Is there any question by my colleagues for page 8? I'm looking to the chat. I don't see any message coming out or anybody texting they want to ask a question on page 8. Page 8 talks about the business privilege tax bonds, the business privilege, CD, DOE series for Ukido High School and limited obligation business privilege tax. I'm looking. I see Senator Therese. She's going to send me a message. Why don't I go ahead and call you up, Senator Therese? Do you have a question, ma'am? Okay. I'm looking at the screen. Do we have any questions on page 8? And I understand that yesterday, folks, I know that Lester asked that we commit to a certain amount. We can't commit to any amount, but we can discuss the whole budget bill. Because when we commit, we do that on the floor. Okay, I want to make sure that we all understand that. That's why we only have a discussion in this committee meeting. When we get to the floor, all the amendments that we have received, that's on the drive, you all have it. We can discuss every possible amendment. Because by the time we get to the floor, some of those amendments, I mean, I've talked already, Senator Moynihan, they may just not even come up. But at least we've discussed it. We all understand what could be posed to the body when we come back. All right? And then when we get to chapter 14 and 15, then that's when I'll ask Ms. Mendiola to talk about the refinancing. All right? I still don't see any questions. So I guess page 8, we're good to go so far for discussion purposes. All right? Is everybody on track? We're on page 8 on the budget bill. Keep in mind, we have 159 pages, so we have 151 to go. I see nothing on my right on the chat. I'm looking at my phone also. I see. I see Lester asking if we can adopt the revenues, but I'm going to tell you right now, the way the revenue is presented, Lester, I agree with you. Just for purpose of discussion moving forward, you've identified, Lester, the corporate of instead of 85, make it 87. Instead of withholding 230, make it 235. I think that's in discussion mode, and that the body would have to ask that there'll be a motion, the amendment to add it on when we reach the floor. But at least everyone, all the colleagues, all the senators here are aware of the proposed amendment. All right, Lester?
Sir?
Yes.
Yes, and I appreciate that. I was just trying to see whether or not there was a way that, since it is your committee and your committee submitted the substitute bill, that the discussion generated from these meetings are reflected in a bill as further substituted by the committee, including some idea as to whether or not the upward revenue adjustments were, at least at the committee level, adopted, so that when we go back to session, we know that you did, there was a concession to the governor's request to get the upward adjustment, because without the upward adjustment, everything else that follows, sir, is, I mean, when we discuss every agency and the funding level, you know, it's important that we understand under what level we're going, because the governor's asking for a $7 million increase, and if we're going to proceed without that, then we're gonna have some fundamental issues.
No, I understand that. I just don't want to. I don't believe the committee is willing to commit yet to the 7, because that I know will be discussed on the side. I know that every colleague here is. Some of them are hesitant But I know that as we move along, Lester, on each chapter that identifies the agency, if anybody doesn't identify where they're going to take it from, they need to understand that the increase that the governor's office and yourself has presented, the additional 7 million, is where they're going to end up saying we're going to agree to the 7 as we're moving along. I just don't want them to commit now and then we have to make adjustments throughout the budget that, okay, take 1 million here, take 1 million here, and it's not going to work.
Okay,
You know what I
so,
mean?
yeah, and then, sir, one more thing, and I'll promise I'll be out of your hair. If all the could please have that comparative that I provided last week. It's like 7 or 8 pages, and you look at the right columns, and it show you the substitute bill recommended funding level by agency and by fund source, either general fund or special fund, and then the differences between what the administration is asking for in the FY21 BBMR versus the substitute bill. Please be guided by the differences. Again, I'll use Senator Kelly as an example. There are allocation differences based upon the 781 and the 775 funding levels. And you'll see the variations in the OFB versus the administration's recommendation for funding. And I would highly encourage everybody, when you start going through this agency by agency discussion, Mr. Chair, that they be guided by this document, because it does reflect what the substitute bill and the allocations are versus what is the administration is advocating for. So with that, sir, I will be quiet.
All right. And thank you, Lester. I think you're referring to that big sheet, right? That we had made copy at the during session.
Yes, sir. Exactly.
It says in the very top, it says FY 2021, a comparative substitute bill 28235 versus BBMR rebuttal. Correct?
Yes, exactly, sir.
Okay. So and that's what I was referring to, Lester, is that as the colleagues, as we go through this budget, when you start saying that's something to consider, you're basically supporting the adjustment from page 2. If you don't make the adjustment and always refer to the governor's the BBMR's rebuttal to the increase of the 7 million, be mindful. If you needed more funding to those agencies, that's the only way you're going to get the funding, unless you take from another agency, and you've got to identify the impact to that agency, such as defunding personnel that are there. Okay, Lester?
That's fair, sir.
All right. Thank you. So my colleagues, I'm looking now. We got Senator Moylan. Stay on a bill. I believe we have to agree on the revenue level now before we go forward. It's fundamental. All right. Then I'll go back then. Senators, and maybe you can make that statement clear to everybody. I know everybody's reading it, but are you saying then, Senator Torres, maybe we'll go back to page 2 before we move on page 8 and 9, and say, and come to a general consensus, not an agreement on the amendment. Remember, we're not going to approve an amendment. We're only have a general agreement by this body, by this committee, that we adopt on page 2, the 85 to 87 million, the 230 to 235.
Thank you,
I'm
Mr.
looking
Chair.
All right, go ahead.
As a matter of course, it's always necessary to have a baseline. We agree on the revenue projections and adopt that as our baseline. Just speaking from past experience where we agree on a projection, and then if there's going to be an adjustment further down per agency, the rule was usually, from past experience, the rule was always, if you're going to add to one, you have to show the offset, right? So if you're going to,
that's correct.
If you're going to get one, you have to offset by reducing somewhere else. But the
Senator Torres, you're coming in broken up on my side. I don't know if it's my side or
I'm
it's,
sorry, I believe I'm breaking up.
Joe, can you check AV folks and see how we can make sure we get that fixed for Senator Torres?
Yes, sir. It may be on her end,
Yeah, it
as
may-
everyone else is coming in clear.
Okay, so I think it may be my end. They were doing some work on the internet in our area, so it could just be my connection.
Well, you're coming in clear right now, ma'am. And I agree with you. We need to be able to establish a foundation because on page 3, on line 10, the budget bill we have in front of us says 630 million. If we're going to get an informal general consensus of the body here that is 637, then we can move forward and either we're going to accept the six. Remember, we're only in discussion now, just an informal agreement in this committee, and that either are we going to stick to the 630 and move forward, and then adjust to 637. We need to and I agree with what Senator Torres brought up, just so that we have a foundation of what we're dealing with, because the governor's office or BBMR presented, like I advise everybody, if you look at your sheet, you know where the amount's at, where they had proposed that increase, but this body will determine if they accept that increase or they want to they have their own priorities on where it'll go. Okay? I see here, right, Senators, and I know I have Senator Sabina. I got you next. Senators, are you pretty much done on that statement, just so we have an understanding and everybody understands?
I am, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Sabina, you have a question, ma'am?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. To get some clarification on the breakdown of that 7 million, which agencies is it being appropriated to?
Okay.
It could be from OFB or BBM.
Okay, Senator Perez, that was provided to everybody when we had session. I think I don't know if your sheet is as long as big as mine, but that was all provided, and that's why we have to be very. We have to take a look at all the documents we got during session. BBMR provided that. I had the copies run at Central, and everybody was issued one. If you look at the document, it breaks down every agency of how that 7 million is to be spread out. And as we go along, and that's why Senator Torres brought up Senator Perez, if we agree to the 630, which is what I presented on the budget, then we just continue on. If we want to informally, generally agree to the 637 as we go along through the chapters, we'll be able to look at the sheet and show that, and Lester will be able to speak and say, the increase was this much for like DOE and so forth. Our proposal is this much. This is what BBMR's proposal is going to be, and we can move along from there because we're going to see every agency on this budget. So we'll be able to see it and talk about it as we go along. Okay, Senator Perez, did you find your sheet?
Yeah, I was just hoping you have a quick summary for us.
Oh, no. I'd have to go down the same sheet that everybody, because we're discussing this in committee, we're going to go to every page of this budget bill. And as we go through it, we'll be able to see it. If you want, I can ask Lester to present generally a summary of where the money is going to go. But see, that's moving ahead on the chapters. When we should just go down chapter by chapter and we haven't comment. Is he looking at any increase on DOE, for example, which is the next chapter? Is he increasing anything for UG? And we can, and then that could be the summary that he can present as we move along.
Yeah, I think this ties in with Senator Torres's question about accepting the 7 million increase. That might, sway some votes perhaps. So, I'd be good information to have in the beginning. I'll go through it. But if Mr. Carlson is here still, he can maybe, since he did provide his side of the budget proposal, if he can maybe talk to where that 7 million is going to go to. But it looks like
great. We'll have Lester speak to that. I'm looking at him. Did he disappear on us? Where you at, Lester?
Stop by, sir. He is logging back in. He got kicked off a little earlier or disconnected.
We better check. Well, what's his phone connection? Is that the golf club?
Hello there.
Lester, if Senator Perry is asking, if you can generally give us a summary of where that 7 minutes is being distributed in a general statement, because I don't want to skip the chapters. And I don't want our colleagues here to be asking questions that we're bouncing around. He'll give the general statement and then we'll go to the chapters. Okay, we all understand that's how we're gonna move. We're not gonna jump to chapter 4 or 5 or 10 or whatever. You just go down chapter one at a time. So before Lester, you start, can we generally, all folks just agree that we're generally done then on page 9, which is all about the debt service. Okay, and if unless I see that no, then we can't even get Lester to give it anything, because it's all talking about the debt service, which is about 90 million, which automatically will change. Steve, what is the total amount would be as you increase, Steve, on the debt service from page 7? The total amount of, instead of 90 would be what? 95?
Hold on, sir. Total debt service would be.
Same as last year.
No, but if you were to add in everything, what's the total?
Steve?
Yes.
It's look at the 2020 budget. It's 96,358,519 less the 2009 GO bond of 5536250. That's approximately the difference, because you're still paying the debt service on everything else. You're just not paying the 2009.
The debt service not for
Okay, so what's the total? What is the total? And from page 9, it'll be the grand total for the debt service then. You got that amount, Lester, with you, based on the budget versus what the change will be?
I do have it somewhere around here. Hang on, sir. And yeah, there's a lot of pieces of paper. $83. Our number is 95,989,272, because there was a change in the debt service from the 2015 BPT bond. So I stand corrected. There was an upward adjustment in 21 versus 20. So again, if you go to our comparative on yeah, anyways, it's Jason is here pointing me in the right direction as usual. Our number is again total.
Yep, on the debt service.
Yeah, that one. Right? No, it's not that. This one. This is something. I mean, that's cool. That's what it is. Yeah.
It's
Okay,
about
so
5 million.
95,989,272.
Correct.
That's correct.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So knowing that number, that's debt service, we're not looking at changing anything that's from the revenue. I also have to advise everybody and remind everybody that we also have Senator Moylan. You wanted to make a comment, sir, based on what your chat is, just so that everybody can see that, and also the people who can hear your comment to that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate Lester's input, and I heard my colleagues' discussion as well on accepting these numbers or increasing it. I would really recommend so we can move forward on this, because we're not going to make any decision until we actually get to the floor.
That's correct.
If we're changing the numbers now, then we come to the floor and we don't change the numbers, total confusion. I understand Lester's point. I can address that when we come to session floor, but I highly recommend, so we can expedite here, that we use the substitute version of 282, the numbers as provided, and just move forward and go through this. So that's just my recommendation. Thank you, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right. Okay, thank you, Jim. Senator Jim. Senator Rigel, you have, and I also want to remind everybody and the people Guam, Senator Torres, before I move to Senator Rigel, you gave a statement here, and I just want everybody to understand why that statement. Oh, well, she stepped away. Oh, there she is. Senator Torres, you believe in the increase in governor's budget are mostly to safety and health. You can make that statement, ma'am, so that everybody understands what's going on.
That's just my cursory observation, looking at the spreadsheet that was provided by Lester. So, I mean, it was just a passing comment because Senator Sabina was asking, you know, where specifically, and I just generalized that I believe it's mostly to public safety and to health.
Yes, and I agree with you. That's generally what I saw. Senator Rigel, you had a question for Senator Carlson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sort of in addition, writing off of Senator Torres's question. So what if either Mr. Carlson or Mr. Byrne have any way of letting us know what impact may be had if we do not adopt 7 million more in revenues? Do you have any idea of any impact?
If I may, Senator Rigel, and of course, Mr. Byrne can chime in as well. The governor is requesting, in order to be able to adequately fund public health, safety, and education, the upward $7 million adjustment. Similar to what Senator Torres has observed, and I think Senator Rigel, you could also see that when you go down those two columns, the OFB and the administration's numbers, it's not just as simple as saying, oh, the difference total $7 million. We have a difference of opinion in the allocation levels and how, as Senator Torres points out, you can't just use $7 million as here, here, and here. It's spread out in what we believe is a very efficient, effective allocation based upon the agency's bare operating needs. We went back in June and we revised the executive budget numbers. We went through and we looked at position changes, personnel requirements, recruitments in progress, rent, utilities, and we came up with what we believe are numbers sufficient so that we can continue providing for, as the title of the budget bill says, and please bear with me, an act making appropriations for the operations of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the government of Guam for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2021, and making other appropriations, establishing legislative and administrative provisions. So we've done what we believe is the allocation to meet those operational requirements. And it's not as easy as saying it's $7 million, boom, boom, and boom. Our allocation differs from OFB's. They have their way of looking at things, and we have our way of looking at things. And you'll see very clearly in those two columns and the variance column exactly what those things are. And as Senator Torres points out, and thank you, ma'am, for that very keen observation, and the chairman for acknowledging that we do have differences in public safety and public health, and a pretty big one in education as well.
All right, Senator Rigel, we're good.
Yeah, I guess my question was just, are there negative impacts without the 7 million to those agencies?
Yes, sir. Definitely, sir. Definitely. My good friend Edward Byrne, if you would please, sir, elaborate specifically on your agency and what the funding level in the substitute bill would cause to your agency specifically.
Yes, sir. Thank you for allowing me to leap in on this. Senators, this agency, which is responsible for the administration of the central line, including health and public safety, seems to have, in this bill, taken a disproportionate reduction to the point where we're not only faced with the possibility of not funding the positions that we happen to have vacant at this moment, or at the time that the snapshot was taken of the funding ability, but also of some people that have been transferred back into our department and also require funding. And if we can't fund them, we're faced with obviously possible personnel reductions. And I would like to advise you that that might be, well, not might be, but it's very likely to be counterproductive. So that's the way, but I think, taking on Mr. Carlson's point of view, that we're not the only agency that's faced with that particular dilemma, and we'll find that out as we go through the bill and review Mr. Carlson's spreadsheet, which actually does, when you go down the numbers, does demonstrate the differences between the administration and this bill.
Okay. All right, Senator Rigel, are we good?
Excuse me, Senator.
Senator Rigel, are we good?
Yes, so, yeah, unless there's anything else they want to add. I mean, they keep mentioning about public health and safety. What exactly are the impacts to safety and health?
Okay, I think we go back then to what Senator Paris was asking, was a general summary of what are we looking at. We have Senator Tello, you had a question regarding the spreadsheet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to my colleagues and those who are here today during this hearing. Verifying, it is, Lester, it is the one that says not for public distribution, the green one we're looking at. Am I correct, Lester?
Yeah, but we gave it to you.
Okay, so on the I'm sorry, what did he say? He gave it to me? What?
In other words, even if it's not for public distribution, it was given to all of us for discussion. So in other words, we try not to get it out to the newspaper and everything. That's what he's actually asking.
Sorry, sometimes it's muffled. I can't hear. But anyways, regarding the spreadsheet, I just want to make it clear, because the first part of this, if you look at, it's the red, in red and in parentheses. This is the areas in which BBMR is requesting for us to fund. For instance, the Office of the Governor at the very beginning, it's at number 1, it says $55,000. Is that, okay, so the red means less than last year, right? If I'm not mistaken. The red means last year. Less.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No. Just take the two columns to the left of the 55,000. You'll see FY21 BBMR at 6,200,000, and then you'll see the S bill of 6,145,000. Therein lies the difference of 55,000.
Okay.
So we're only discussing the 21 administration revised budget and the S bill.
Okay, so I'm trying to find out your difference in per agencies that were discussed, where we fall short, or the substituted bill falls short, and where you want to feel that there should be more funding to that. And I'm looking at that particular line where all the red is at, which also shows a difference between your budget and the substitute. The one in black underneath, directly under DOA, charter school support, there's in black 82. This is still under, well, I think you know where it's at. So it's charter school administrative support. You have 82,558, and it's in black. Is that meaning that's where you want to put the funding?
No, that just describes the difference between our for allocation and the S bill, and I will
Okay.
draw the body's attention. Yeah, I'll draw the body's attention to that. We added one more charter school.
Okay, so
yeah.
Lester, that being said, where is it on this spreadsheet that you asked us to look at to see the difference? Can you give me an example of a particular agency in which you would like additional funding? What page and where?
Daphne would like to be able to talk about DRT.
Okay, but we're on this spreadsheet. I'm looking at the spreadsheet so we can follow. Okay, good. So if you show me, Daphne, where?
So I believe if you look at the just that first page, and if you kind of scroll toward just right above the half point of the page, you'll see Department of Revenue and Taxation. And if you scroll across toward the right, you'll see a negative 465,203. So basically, if you look, as Mr. Carlson or Director Carlson mentioned, the 9.410 million was what we were appropriated in FY 2020. We had requested for that in FY 2021, but of course, because of I guess the adjustments that may be required to be made, there was an adjustment of $465,200 to our. Oh, there's a potential, of course, adjustment of 465,000, and I guess that's the potential impact of this 7 million for DRT. We have a very basic budget. I don't know. I'm sure the senators, you've seen our budget. It basically consists of our contracts for our IT services, our rent, and what's included in our utilities for the rent for our building. Outside of that, it's really salaries and wages. So for us, what this would mean is, that there wouldn't be, I guess, the level of funding that we would need to be able to support some of the hiring that we need to do. So that's really where we're going to see it. So again, that $465,203 represents probably a reduction in our headcount. And again, only because we have a very basic budget, but that's on the DRT side.
Okay.
Okay.
I think Senator. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the last thing that I wanted to bring up is that I'm seeing the difference. I have the same kind of chart that I've created myself on this one. I was just trying to find out if this red indicates all the way to the bottom the total of $7 million that is the difference, because you're just comparing, so I don't really, it's not a real clear picture. However, during the section on office technology, that's why it's important, Mr. Chair, to find out about the CARES Act money. How much money was given to certain agencies during this time to upgrade whatever they need to upgrade at this point. So I know that Steve has done his due diligence in looking at the budget bill and ensuring that the essentials are there that are needed in that agency, that only warm bodies are set, funding is set aside for warm bodies and no new hires. And that's why I think the CARES Act would show us, the spending of this CARES Act to show us where it's been, subsidized in areas that we could not because of our issue with funding. So anyways, I just wanted to go down that list to make sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, I understand, and I agree with you. Lester, maybe you can answer that question. And maybe my colleagues, because we have Senator Lee. Before you answer the question, I'll have Senator Lee first ask the question to DRT and maybe associate to what was asked already. Senator Lee?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to give Ms. Shimizu an opportunity to maybe elaborate a little bit. She was mentioning that some hiring issues would kind of be in place because of this. So I just wanted to give her an opportunity to tell us a little bit more about the impact that this might have on DRT.
Sure, and thank you, Senator Lee. With regards to DRT, of course, we continue, I think, just like many of our agencies, we continue to be challenged in terms of hiring. What we had done in this prior year, and I think DOA and BBMR for assisting with working to help us to do something that hasn't been done in many years is, we've actually this year had planned to and been trying to give opportunities for there to be some upward mobility so that people could be moved into higher positions, and then so that we can then come and bring and hire people in the entry level positions. I think that, what this reduction would mean for us is that we wouldn't be able to hire those additional headcount. And so, we may continue to have perhaps the same level of headcount that we have had. And of course, we've been challenged in that way. At DRT, just like a lot of the other agencies, we do have, we have several charges. The law requires us to collect, and we have, many different groups. And of course, especially during this time when we're shut down or suspending services to the public, it makes it even more challenging to be able to provide services that people need and to provide them timely. So, we are challenged in many areas, of course, in the area of driver's license, which, we're doing our best to enhance in that area. We know that in our BPT area, and I know Senator Perez brought this up in the last week when there was session, she brought up the issue, which was also brought up in the public auditor's report, that, our BPT has been an area, or business privilege tax group has been an area where we have been having challenges in trying to keep up. So there are many implications, I guess, with regards to, what may happen in the event that, we do have to take a cut. And again, because our budget's very basic, and because we're required already by contract to pay certain minimum amounts for our building, and also for our, our other contracts, really any additional adjustments really could only be adjusted to the classification of salaries. And so that's going to be some place where we're going to have to make adjustments.
All right, Senator Lee, does that kind of answer your questions? All right, thank you. There's a question here, Lester, before you speak. Senator Amanda, you have a question? Yeah, because I want to make a general statement across the board for all the agencies. But Senator Amanda, you have a question, ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just, wanting to follow up on something that Senator Tello also mentioned about the grand total from this worksheet that BBMR provided us. And Mr. Carlson, if you can just comment on it, because I'm looking at the total on the back side of this spreadsheet that comes out to more than $7 million. So I'm wondering if you'll be providing something updated to us so that we adopt that. If we adopt that revenue projection of $7 million, is there an adjusted sheet that you want us to refer
to? Thank you, Senator Shelton. There's a couple of discrepancies that we brought to OFB's attention that remain unresolved with the substitute bill. On page 112, there is a appropriation to GDOE from a capital improvement projects, something. There is no such fund source. And so that takes and skews comparison off by $1 million. And then the budget, as it stands, just the substitute bill is unbalanced. There's $95,000 unappropriated. We believe that there was some positions at the Veterans Affairs that were funded in this fiscal year that were not funded under this, and it just kind of comes out to like the same amount for these Veterans Affairs counselors, I think they are. So the exercise of being able to go through and say, okay, here, this is $7 million. It won't work out that way, Senator Shelton, simply because the S bill has an inflated appropriation to DOE without a general or special fund source. So that's $1 million overstated. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's the lack of accounting for $95,000 or so because of the not funding of the Veterans Affairs counselors.
Okay, and I'm realizing now that we should also take into account that a couple of days ago when we were in session, we adopted the increase in projection for the Manpower Development Fund, which I think you included in this spreadsheet here. So that's also something to take into account. So thank you very much, Mr. Carlson.
You're most welcome, ma'am.
Lester, we have Steve here. I don't think we're going to get any debate on it, but Steve, maybe you might want to respond. And my colleagues, just be mindful. We don't want to move too far ahead from page 9.
Yes.
You got to go down the line. Okay, Steve, if you can comment to that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The $1 million that Mr. Carlson is referring to was basically provided to us in language, and we are not taking it out of the general fund. So the language actually came from BBMR, so that's why it's there.
Okay.
But it's not from the general fund. And as far as the discrepancy on the 90,000, we've already identified that. We've already made the corrections, and we're going to propose it on the floor to make that a correction.
Okay.
The other thing,
yes, go ahead.
The other thing, Mr. Chairman, is that, regarding, the R&T situation, please bear in mind that, the general fund was reduced by $29 million. Now that 29 million reduction was spread out across all the departments and agencies. There are going to be some agencies that got bigger reductions and some get smaller. But at least in the allocation, what we thought was to make sure that we covered basic requirements. Now, in preparing the ceilings, remember we had deadlines, we had cutoff dates. When we made the decision to not fund vacant positions, it was at a certain time. If the administration, they'll continue their operation, start filling these positions after the deadline, then of course those won't be covered. But we just need to find some way to address those concerns. And it's a matter of timing. That's all it is. And the other thing too is in regards to revenue and tax, and I'll help Daphne out on section 6 of page 7. There's language there that allows up to 10% of the ACTC reimbursement to go back to revenue and tax to hire personnel. So, we're trying to do our best to administrate to help them. If it's not in their ceiling, we'll try to do something else to figure out how we can help the agencies. In this case with revenue and tax, although it's not a specific amount that's appropriated to them, there is language that allows certain funding in the future, should it materialize, to be available to them.
Okay. Now, just trying to close the loop here. I understand where DRTs come. I understand where every agency come from. What I'm more concerned about is that on the last term, the Department of Revenue and Tax, I stand by speaker, the last time the Department of Revenue and Tax, and it's the same DOE director, okay, DOA director, that we gave Department of Revenue and Tax $1.some million to hire folks. They didn't even use half of that, okay? I'm only concerned is that as Ms. Daphne is promoting, and every other agency is gonna promote, they need to hire folks. The process of hiring folks is such, and I'm not insulting DOA. Maybe they just don't have enough people to process it, but it's such a slow process that people are not getting hired to do the job that needs to get done. That has been always the obstacle in every administration. So that being said, and I know that everybody's looking at it, I have Senator, Madam Speaker, you waved your hand. I'm looking for your name here, but go ahead and speak, Madam Speaker, and so we can move on.
Mr. Chair, and with all due respect, just looking at this budget spreadsheet and what's happening, I think our colleagues should take the time to at least, can we move to recess, and maybe we can come back after looking the spreadsheet thoroughly and then seek for more justification after thoroughly looking after at the spreadsheet.
All right, thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Munoz, you had something you wanted to have a comment? I want to give you a chance to comment before I pose the recess, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Actually, the way I'm looking at the spreadsheet that Speaker was just referring to, and I think the $7 million specifically is just under the general fund appropriations. And the way I'm looking at it's on page 6 of 8 on the spreadsheet. And you'll see that the BBMR's 2021 rebuttal is 637,111,951. And if you look at page 2 under general fund, it's 630-111-951. So I think that's specifically where the $7 million is. And like Senator Perez was mentioning, it's really hard to pinpoint exactly where the agencies are given more or taken from, because it's a give and take. There's some red and there's some black, and I think there's just, I mean, it's really hard to pinpoint exactly which agency is getting more or less. But basically that 7 million is just under the general fund, the way I'm looking at it. I don't know if Mr. Carlson can acknowledge that, but the way I'm looking at it in their spreadsheet under the FY 2021 BBMR rebuttal on page 6 of 8, that's where I see that the $7 million difference is.
You're absolutely correct, Senator Munoz.
Okay. All right, folks.
Mr. Chairman, could I just comment on something that Steve just said?
All right, go for it, Ed.
Thank you, sir. We've already, he was talking about the ACTC allocation, but I think when we dealt with page 2, we already took account of the entire ACCC credit when we looked at the tax refunds of 125 million. Therefore, I don't think you can take further credit at Rev and Tax for any further amount, because we've already assumed that the whole amount will be repaid into the tax credit, the tax refunds.
Right, and thank you, Director Byrne. Sorry, to further, excuse me, Mr. Chair, is it all right if I just speak? And I want to thank also, of course, Mr. Guerrero from OFB, because I appreciate as well the support, of course, that OFB and our entire legislature has given to our agency. Just to clarify, and maybe to springboard off of the point that Director Byrne was making, is that with regards to our funding, with regards to, of course, our head count, we actually do already, I mean, even outside of the amounts that's showing on this spreadsheet, take into consideration when we look at our staffing pattern, the amounts that are funded through the ACTC. So, I guess to that point, even including the reimbursement for ACTC, this additional monies that's going to be potentially a reduction will impact our hiring. But again, thank, of course, Director Guerrero from OFB, and thank you, Director Byrne, for pointing that out.
All right, my colleagues, there was a request that we go ahead and recess for now. Everybody, take a look at your large sheet. Go over it, understand it, so we're not jumping around. When we come back, we will go specifically to if there's a consensus to generally endorse the 7 million or not. And then after that, we will jump right into DOE and we will move along. All right? So at this point, Senator Tello.
Mr. Chair, whether we take a consensus, I really don't understand I know what consensus is, but I just don't understand how it's going to, if we move forward and we all take a consensus to adopt, we can change our mind later on in the budget bill.
Yes, you can.
It doesn't really matter, or why we even take a consensus. I know that you're laying it out on the line for us. BBMR is laying it out on the line for us. We've been given the spreadsheet since last week to go over, to review it. There's no, Mr. Chair, you even said it, we have 155 more pages to go. It's only 11 o'clock. Can't we just continue on and working and asking questions until 12, take a break, and during the lunch break, everybody can take their time and review it? I just think that, we're waiting for a consensus that we cannot vote on. That's not going to be, set in stone. There's a lot more to discuss here. So I think these breaks are not needed. We have people here that took their time out. Daphne, we now have Tina Garcia online, individuals who've come to be here today. I think we owe it to them to continue on at least till 12, Mr. Chair, respectfully.
Thank you for your comment. I'm looking at the webs on the sides here, and that was requested by a committee member. At recess, I see Senator Lee and the committee members. I understand that there's folks that were invited. Christine Garcia is here in substitute of Mel Mendiola. I think Lester, BBMR and DOA and DRT are in hope that we agree to the 7. So as we move along, I just want to make sure then as we move along, don't expect me to entertain you jumping chapters. Okay, are we in agreement generally on page 9 from the committee, and we'll move from page 9. We'll go to 10, and we will have to call in DOE so we can discuss DOE, and then we move from there. But if we're not going to come up with a general review of exactly adding the 7 million, don't expect to be discussing adding the million. Okay, unless you're Senator Therese, you got your mic on. You wanted to make a statement, ma'am?
Yes, I just think it would be helpful. I tried to have this discussion over the weekend with OFB, but I think it's helpful to just, you know, that's what the break is requested for, is to go over the spreadsheet and to determine again, one more time, you know, where the differences are. But I know that Lester and Steve Guerrero from OFB are very aware of where these differences are. And I think it's helpful to just continue to discuss those. I don't think it's jumping chapters. I think it's just highlighting why they think, or, you know, what they think are the big policy questions before us, which is, yeah, do we adopt additional revenues or not? And whether there are huge cuts to agencies are very relevant to that question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll continue on, but we will take a short recess, and the reason for that is because we're going to bring in DOE on the Zoom, because we're going to page 10, which is chapter 2. We're going to go in and not worry about the total amount, Senator Therese, and that's basically what everybody's discussing, okay? And I see that with Senator Tello and everybody else.
That's also what I'm asking, Mr. Chair, if that before we get to the DOE chapter, we just finish with this revenues. We talk about it with Lester and OFB, just clarifying some more. For example, BBMR and Rev and Tax is saying they're not going to be able to fund their positions, but OFB has told us they have funded all warm bodies. And so that needs to be clarified. That needs to be made crystal clear. Yes.
Yes, Steve, can you go ahead and comment generally for the whole budget on what was added on the funding?
Yes, Senator. As I mentioned earlier, when we were preparing the ceilings for these departments, our cutoff date basically, I believe, was the 7th or 8th of August, the night before the bill was submitted. So at that point, we've made decisions to put deadlines in place in order for us to come up with these numbers. And if we didn't put a deadline, there was no way we can put these. I mean, I couldn't be able to justify the numbers if I didn't put in conditions in order to come down to that number. So the information we received, I believe, all the way up until I believe the 6th or 7th, that evening when we were preparing the budget, was to make sure to the best of our ability that we covered all warm bodies. You know, we tried to extend and contact the agencies as much as possible, but it was almost impossible. It's a moving target. So what we hope we did was at least those positions that are filled, we call them warm bodies, and then those that we were told or informed that probably not so much in transit, because you know you can tell me, well, I got 10 people waiting for interviews. But if they're not on board and they're not certified with a GG1, they're technically not hired. So where do I put the cut? Where do I put the deadline for these types of documents? So we do our best to make sure that as of, I believe, the 7th, when we prepared the budget, that all warm bodies that we knew of were funded. We also went and said if there was any excess within the ceiling after we funded all the warm bodies, we went down to contractual obligations. We went down to office rent. We went down to utilities. And even at doing that, there were some agencies that just ran out of, there was no balance left to fund everything. So what we did, we tried to do our best to, within the ceiling we allocated, that was basically the ceiling for the agencies. So if you take a look at the list, we have differences between us and BBMR, and they have their reasons why their numbers are higher and lower. But it's a snapshot in time, and that's just how things were done. Here we are speaking, 2 weeks later. They could have hired people yesterday. Wasn't part of it. They could have transferred people yesterday. It wasn't part of the analysis. So that's a difficult part in trying to establish a ceiling for these agencies. And if you ask me today what I know today of the agency, I didn't know 2 weeks ago. Because all these things are new. They're coming up daily. But at a point in time when we developed these ceilings, those were the considerations we took into consideration, basically, to come up with these ceilings.
Okay, Senator Therese.
Thanks. So Mr. Guerrero, thank you. And so you're saying that as of August 8th, you believe that the OFB substitute bill covered all warm bodies, all people who had a GG1, contracts that were already in place, rent and utilities for all the agencies, that those were covered in this OFB sub bill.
Senator, as much as possible, yes.
And so the differences that BBMR in their spreadsheet are primarily employees that were not hired as of August 8th?
It could be employees that were not hired. It could be obligations that they incurred afterwards or we weren't aware of. So therefore, maybe that is the reason and the justification for the additional 7 million.
I don't know about the rest of you, Mr. Chair, but I'm curious to hear from BBMR if that's the case, or if there are other things that were just like, besides the two he mentioned earlier, that were just not included in error or something.
All right, no, I don't blame you. I like to hear it also. Lester, other than the two, talk about everything else, not the two.
Yeah, just in general, sir, for the body's understanding on our approach for agency level funding. We do the same thing that OFB did up until a point, because we understand recruitments in progress that aren't reflected in the AS 400. And so, OFB doesn't have the luxury of understanding, and Steve is right, there is a point in time. However, the ability for us to have incorporated what we believe are the most accurate personnel requirements is reflected in what it is we have in our budget numbers. So it's not that we have a fundamental disagreement, and I think Mr. Guerrero is correct. At a certain point of time, they had to have a number. And I don't fault him for a number that is probably, not representative of FTEs plus recruitments in progress. That's understandable. Our numbers are, though, and there is the primary difference. As everybody understands, personnel costs are the biggest cost of the government of Guam. So when you go down this spreadsheet, you're going to see differences, unless they're purely debt service or something of that nature. They're personnel related. A good example is that thing that we just talked about earlier with the charter school administration. Mr. Byrne needs to have people at DOA to facilitate the charter schools accounting requirements and other needs, and therein lies where it is that number comes from. But it's really personnel, and so we agree to disagree on some things, but for the most part, OFB and BBMR agree, and we also ensure that we have contracts that are fully funded because there's just necessary functions. I give Mr. Guerrero credit. The initial, one of the earlier drafts of the budget bill didn't fully fund the single audit, and that's a contractual arrangement. And so when it was brought to his attention, he adjusted it to the number. This is the kind of give and take that Mr. Guerrero and BBMR have had over the course of months, and we're fundamentally not that far off. And it seems like we're like $35 million apart, and we're not. And a lot of these things, I believe, our mindsets and our approaches are the same. It's just access to data, and our allocation might be a little bit different than Mr. Guerrero's, and it may not be totally driven by money. It might be something that we believe, in the case of DOA and DRT, that we know how the ACTC varies from year to year. It's not a static number, but we also understand that there are certain positions that are ACTC funded. And, so that, as mentioned earlier, that's already taken into the equation. Yet still, after you take into all of these factors, we still believe that they're underfunded. And I understand the chairman's point about, providing the funding. And I also understand the chairman has a deep background in DRT, so he understands those positions are difficult to fund. So, but I think the baseline number that we're advocating for DRT, and the difference that OFB has really is, fundamentally driven by personnel requirements and maybe just, timing. I will concede that Mr. Guerrero does have a point in that regard. We don't disagree on like 99% of what it is that's going down here. It's just some of the things that we have firsthand knowledge about, maybe, and we share the information. I mean, he's seen our numbers. He knows what it is.
Mr. Chair, just as a point of information, last year we ensured that we were able to hire a full-time person under Department of Administration. So I'm hoping that that's DOA did. Okay. And I understand that they were also given some options for budget. And I believe we were also given they were also given some appropriation for office and office space and materials that they needed. So hopefully, because it was mentioned that was executed, because that's what we did fund. We funded a full-time person.
All right.
Yeah,
all right.
Speaker, yes, we did. But I think the point Mr. Carlson was making was that we've got a new charter school here, so we need to make sure that what was being provided in this revised budget that came from OFB was sufficient to be able to cover that too.
Yes. So we did make sure that the bodies that were funded from last fiscal year, right? That all those bodies are also funded in this appropriation, and so I believe it's a continuance.
All right. Okay. Senator Therese, you wanted to follow let's wrap you up on that issue. You had the two talks already.
Just so, Mr. Guerrero, could you just please confirm whether the changes or the changes that you see requested from BBMR in this spreadsheet are for personnel or for contracts? I mean, if it's for personnel, what contracts are they asking be changed, and should we ignore those?
Senator, if you look at the spreadsheets are done by lump sum. It would be very difficult for me. I do not have that information to determine the ins and outs of these numbers going into these departments, whether or not, and what they're funded, what the purpose of the funds are for. they're doing it by bottom line. I mean, you may be able to ask Lester for that detailed information, but for us here, it's just a comparison between bottom lines per department.
That to me, Mr. Chair, explains the reason why, yeah, we can't get sufficient answers out of OFB on the differences, and perhaps, you know, if BBMR wants to send us another sheet with the details, how much of it is really for personnel that was hired from after August 8th versus contracts that were encumbered or any other things that were encumbered, you know, after August 8th. I think that's important to know. That open.
Yeah, Senator Terlahi. Go to page 1, Office of Technology.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that $515,000 cut will probably be exclusively from contracts, because the funding level for the personnel at OTEC will certainly be covered, but you know, they have a plethora of contracts with different IT vendors. So that 515, I can almost bet you Steve's $5 in his pocket it's going to cut contracts.
Well, yeah, well, hopefully you have that detailed information and that we know. So are you telling us, Office of Technology entered into all those $500,000 worth of contracts after August 8th? Something like that?
No, ma'am. What I'm saying is the proposed funding level for fiscal 21, the reduction of $515,000 is almost exclusively in contracts. That's what I'm saying.
Well, then, Mr. Chair, it's just not making sense again. You know, OFB said they've covered the contracts and they've covered the employees up to August 8th. So there's something else that we can't, you know, we're not going to get the details. We're just guessing. Yeah, I would ask that BBMR provide the details of you know, the difference between personnel and contracts after August 8th, if that's what they're trying to find.
Yeah, Senator, if I may just say something, please remember that in my statement to you, the ceilings that we provided to the agencies, we try to do our best to cover as much as the ceiling will cover. There are some agencies that may have received a reduced ceiling level over FY 2020 that maybe in 2021 might not be sufficient enough to cover. But because of the allocation, they were limited and they were capped at that amount. So Lester might be right that the amount that's required to cover all contracts may have exceeded their ceiling. But again, if that's the ceiling, that's what we're asking the agencies to live within.
Okay, so OFB's but sub-bill did not necessarily cover all contracts. That's what you're saying. It covered personnel up to August 8th. Yes.
Yes.
And but not necessarily all contracts, depending on the allocation level you gave them.
That's correct, Senator.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. There is still a request for more information, more detail on the spreadsheet that BBMR provided. Am I correct, Senator Therese? More details so we know exactly what that increase is broken down, correct?
I don't know. It's kind of now we're comparing apples and oranges. So yes, I mean, we want to know what's the difference, what we're not funding if we don't put in the extra 500,000, and he's going to say it's you know, those contracts, but we're really not sure. It would have to be that comparison. Yeah.
Right. And that's what I'm getting at. And for my colleagues, I would ask the OFB and BBMR. And that's why we can't go forward until everything is discussed. Otherwise, we can't use a number. We have DOE on standby, okay? It's 11:23 right now. You wanted, Senator Tello wanted to go to 12. 30 minutes is not going to wrap up DOE. And I would ask BBMR and Steve, go over the issue. I see Senator Kelly waving her hand. Senator Kelly, go ahead.
Ms. Massey, Mr. Chair, I also had a comment stated in the chat to let you know I wanted to make a comment. So I'm glad for the questions that have been asked, because we need to understand happened. And then I just want to make a comment that as legislators and having oversight, that our consideration is along some of the same lines, but I want to also just say that when we're balancing all of these different interests and being as responsible as we can, that part of it is warm bodies. Some of them are in the process of interviews and hires, as was mentioned. But we also, especially I think, at least for me, I don't want to speak for other senators, but what we're really keeping in mind is that the services and mandates are being met according to the law and according to the community's needs. And that really has to be an important part of our balance. So I'm for, and I have asked my agencies to cut themselves down to the bare bone, but, you know, meeting those community needs and providing those services, in my eyes, definitely has to be part of that calculation. DPR has been shaved down over the decades, and we hear on a daily basis that they're not able to meet their mandates because they've been shaved down so little. And so I don't want to see another year for an agency like this of not being able to meet their mandate on a daily basis. So I think there has to be a little bit of give and take in there, because our community is paying the price if we're not. So I just wanted to mention that along with the contracts, the federal funding match, at least for some of my oversight, wasn't always entirely met. And as GDOE has mentioned, that's important if we want to continue with those programs and continue to have those federal dollars coming in and serving our communities. So I think it's a little bit more complex. Of course, we're trying to keep it at simple, and we're trying to find ways to make the bare bones work. But I just wanted to have on the record that there does need to be a little bit of complexity in this look as well. So yeah, like I said, I just wanted to have that statement be on the record.
All right. Thank you, Senator Kelly. Senator Lee, and then I have followed by Senator Sabina. Senator Lee, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm in communication back and forth with legal counsel, and I do have an amendment that I'd like to proffer to the committee to consider that will help us to move forward a little bit more efficiently. But I'm just requesting a recess so that I can figure out the additional language with legal. So I'd like to ask that we just I'd like to make a motion to recess until whenever you decide.
All right, thank you. Senator Sabina, you have a question you want to ask, and then we will recess.
Yes,
all right, Senator Sabina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see a discrepancy between two spreadsheets. So the one that everybody's referring to today and the one that was submitted prior regarding the comparative budgets between OFB and BBMR. So one of the discrepancies that I find, so when I looked at the original spreadsheet that was given, there was no difference. What I saw was no difference in the special funds between OFB and BBMR. So looking at this other spreadsheet.
Can you flash that up, the other one you were referring to, Senator Sabina? So like I did earlier, everybody knows it's the big sheet. And what's that other sheet you're referring to? Oh, you're talking about the CRE, right?
Yeah, so there was actually part of the CRE submission, there was a comparative spreadsheet that was provided on the same day. So it doesn't, this is not normally part of the CRE report, but I noticed that with the OFB and BBMR, the special funds are pretty identical. But when you're looking at this one that wasn't supposed to be distributed to the public, we see that in the recycling revolving fund, there is a $500,000 difference between OFB and BBMR. So I'm wondering, you know, that equates to about 20,000 vehicles, additional vehicles fiscally. So I'm just wondering how did OFB come to that figure? If this is the correct number, or are we going to revert back to what was provided with the CRE?
Senator Perez?
Yes.
Yeah, the $500,000. It's probably the Growing Guam Green Initiative that OFB is funding at $500,000.
No, that's.
Oh, yeah, it's yeah. So therein lies that difference. I mean, we didn't have that in our budget. OFB put in $500,000 for the Grow Guam Green Initiative. So that's where that's at.
According to this spreadsheet, it's a BBMR that is doing.
No, ma'am. No.
Yeah.
No, ma'am.
We'll take a quick look at it under BBMR. Oh, sorry. It's this substitute bill is 2,365,523, and BBMR is 2,865,523. Unless this spreadsheet needs to be
Which sheet are you looking at, Senator Perez?
Yeah, the one that wasn't supposed to be released to the public. It's on.
Yeah, is that the big sheet? You're talking about the big sheet, okay?
Yeah. So what I'm seeing.
What page are you on?
Page 2.
Page 2 under who?
Under Guam EPA, the first part of it, recycling.
Yes. Right.
The 500,000.
2,865,523. Under the substitute bill, it says 2,365,523.
Yes, in the S bill, 500,000 was taken from the recycling revolving fund and given to the university for that Grow Guam Green Initiative. So you took
that's
the funding
G3
from
initiative.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, yes, sir. So there's where the funding came from. It was taken from the recycling revolving fund and given to the university. So it's not, we don't, that wasn't our initiative. Okay. We're just telling you where it came from.
Okay, so the reduction, then what I'm seeing here is the reduction in the substitute bill. Okay, so then, okay, I see what you're saying. So the reduction is based on, well, what I'm seeing is the differences, but so, I mean, again, what is this? I guess that's what I was asking in the beginning, is the clarification. It's not very clear when you're looking at the spreadsheet. You know, who's, I guess, okay, I guess.
S bill is OFB's, ma'am. S bill, substitute bill 282.
So the way I was reading this is I was seeing that the additional amount was, okay, so I was, I guess it's not clear as regarding the amounts of the special.
I think Senator Perez and my colleagues, when you look at the sheet, when you see the red, the difference is the difference between BBMR and OFB. The red is showing that more than likely OFB is less and BBMR is more. So when we total it all, you're gonna come up to the 7 million they're talking about, basically restoring where the money's going to. And that's why I'm asking earlier, and we will recess. It is 11:33, and so Senator Perez, you need to just go over the document. Keep in mind, number one, and all my colleagues, what you see in red on the sheet is telling you that the red means OFB is less than BBMR. Okay, let's start with that. And then number two, when you look at the total 7 million, then you can go all the way down, and then you can take a look that Senator Luis Moon identified. When you take a look at it across the board on page 6, I think, or page 6 of 8, you'll find that that's where there's 6.9, which is generally 7 million, where it total out the general fund. And that's how it will work out. Because on the general fund, on EPA, there's no general fund. So it doesn't have nothing to do with the 7 million. When you're looking at this, folks, you need to be able to look at the sheet. You got one column that says general fund, one column says special funds, one says federal matching. The 500,000 came out of the special funds. It has nothing to do with the general fund of the 7 million. So it is now 11:34. We do have DOE on the side. We won't be able to cover much of DOE, We're gonna recess until 1 o'clock, and I'll see you all back then. Thank you.